Hi everyone, I'm Dayna. I'd like to start off by asking you guys about 2 questions. I'm assuming many of you guys will have children in the future if you don't already do so. So wouldn't you guys be concerned with what your child watches, listens to, or plays? Wouldn't you wonder whether or not violence in mass media may have a detrimental impact to you or your child in the future? Because I know I certainly would. And with that brings me to my main claim, that violence in mass media has a negative effect on the audience. I will first illustrate this by showing how violence in movies affect the audience. My second point will be how violence in music causes violent behaviors. My third point will be how violence in media causes desensitization to real-life experiences. My fourth point will be how violence in media affects people's psychological well-being. And my fifth point will be how violence in video games negatively affect those who play them. So to my first point, that violence in movies negatively affect the audience. According to Brad Bushman from the American Psychological Association, or the APA, movie and television producers include acts of violence in order to drive larger audience as well as increase their revenue. However, the producers may oftentimes not take into consideration the kinds of effects their produced violence has on the audience. For instance, the producers of The Dark Knight Rises had no prediction that a massacre would take place due to the triggering of a character within the film. Nevertheless, on July 20th, 2012, a murderer went on a killing spree during a midnight screening of this movie in Aurora, Colorado. According to LA Times author Alex Pham, the prime suspect, James Holmes, was said to be portraying an aggressive character, the Joker, due to the fact that he was wearing similar attire and had dyed his hair red. The power of the character in and of itself caused Holmes to internalize a malicious behavior and act upon it, causing 12 lives to be lost and fear to be embedded nationwide. And now to my second point, that violence in music causes violent behavior. Most of us have seen that music can be a help in a time of need. However, it may also obtain a negative connotation because it can provoke violence among the listener. An example of such behavior would be when Michael Page went on a killing rampage at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin on August 5th, 2012, killing 6. According to Joe Heim, Washington Post editor, violence within a certain genre of music called hate rock, which is intended to look down upon and intimidate other ethnicities and minorities while praising white supremacists like themselves, was said to be the influence of Page's heinous acts. In addition, according to Lisa Mayo, social affairs writer, multiple studies have shown that people are approximately 4 times more aggressive when introduced to brutal lyrics within a song. In 2010, an experiment was conducted to see how violent lyrics affected those who listened to them. The experiment consisted of students who were exposed to only the violent lyrics, while the others were only exposed to background music. They were then asked how many tablespoons of scorching chili they would make someone eat, even though they knew they were not fond of this type of food, thus exhibiting harmful and cruel behavior. The studies found that those who listened to the lyrics were about 4 times more likely to harm others, while those who were introduced to the background music only exhibited 1/4 of these violent tendencies. And now to my third point, that violence in mass media causes desensitization to real-life experiences. Further research resulted in the findings that violence within multiple types of media causes desensitization, also known as reduced emotional responsiveness, to negative stimuli after repeated exposure to it. For instance, Abel Mema, a pediatric nurse, explains that it was established that cartoon violence was in fact portrayed in a humorous fashion, and the consequences of such violence was hardly ever displayed. Thus, the audience may see violence as a fit behavior. And now to my fourth point, that violence in mass media affects people's psychological well-being. Young children have a strong ability to maintain and mimic behaviors that are watched and learned. For example, according to the APA, children copy behaviors that are performed by attractive or inspirational characters on television shows and movies. Since violence is often portrayed in a positive manner, children are more susceptible to mocking these behaviors. According to the psychologist Albert Bandura, modeling is one of the most powerful means of transmitting values, attitudes, and patterns of thought and behavior. With this being said, if children continue to view violence in a susceptible manner, they are more likely to obtain these behaviors and use them to solve future problems. Although violence within media may be short and concise, the effects on the children may be lifelong and altering. And now to my fifth and final point, that violence in video games negatively affect those who play them. Video games that entail forms of violence may also cause desensitization amongst the gamers. For example, during many video games, players are supposed to kill other players, which enable them to win or achieve the main goal of the video game itself. Thus, teaching the game is that if you kill or harm others, you will in turn achieve your potential goal and succeed. Similarly, many school shootings are believed to be rooted from violence within video games, such as the massacre that occurred at Columbine High in Colorado in 1989, killing 13 people and injuring 21 others. According to writer Michael Reagan, the 2 teenage boys who went on the killing spree were well-known players of the game Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, which were in fact first-person shooters, games which revolve around shooting guns and killing others in combat. In addition, the Virginia Tech massacre, which killed 32 people, took place in 2007. It was also said to be the result of video game violence. According to writer Michelle Steinberg, Lyndon LaRoche, chairman of the LaRoche Political Action Committee, stated the perpetrator, Sung-Hee Cho, was known to play the game Counter-Strike that contained numerous amounts of violence, and the violence depicted in the video games may have caused him to obtain psychological impairment. Therefore, a person with such psychological impairment may not be able to differentiate what is fiction and what is non-fiction. Furthermore, video games have been used to actually train people to become killers and obtain aggressive behaviors. According to Michael Reagan, the U.S. Marine Corps licensed the game Doom 2 to change it to Marine Doom, and the U.S. Army created a video game called America's Army, which allowed them to train their men and to become killers and prepare for combat. In conclusion, violence in mass media causes violent, aggressive behavioral tendencies, and that's proven that consumers can easily lose sight of reality. Video games not only are used for entertainment, but are also used for training mechanisms to train soldiers for combat. So, I hope that you guys will agree with me that violence in mass media does in fact negatively affect the audience, and that it is important not only for children, but for parents as well to realize that violence throughout mass media should be regulated and monitored to prevent future violent behavioral actions. Thank you.
Okay, the proposition's clear. The secondary points, as we've had several times today and in other situations, people are starting their claims with the word how, which is transforming it from a declarative statement into an expository statement. You want to avoid that and use the declarative version of the sentence. I thought you did that a little bit better in the later parts of the speech, but at the beginning, especially in the preview and in the first couple of points, that's the way you introduce those particular points. The 5 points that you have, that's a lot of things that you're trying to cover in a short amount of time, and the only reason that you're able to get through them is because you're pretty sketchy on 2 or 3 of them. There's basically one example for each of the first couple of points. I think maybe you've got a stronger argument on the last couple of points, and that if you stuck to those, you could take the information that you have there, expand it a little bit, and have a much more convincing argument. I don't think anybody doubts that occasionally somebody is affected by a movie or by music, but the idea that that means that it's only the movie or the music, or that the movie or the music is the prime factor in these situations, is a little bit problematic. I mean, the examples that you cite in music are all full of hate lyrics and that kind of thing, so people who are already listening to that appear to have some issue to begin with. I'm not exactly sure that they were driving down the road hearing on the radio some song that diminishes some other ethnic group, and they suddenly say, man, I got to go shoot me somebody, or stab people, or whatever the horrifying things that people get in their head. Instead, if you are part of one of these racist organizations that is promoting violent thoughts toward other ethnic groups, and you listen to this music on top of that, could it push some people in that situation? Apparently it could push at least one person in that direction. But you're now creating a generalization about music, which is, a pretty expansive category, based on that single example. I think that that's problematic. And you got the same sort of thing going on with the first point also. So I think that that's a little bit of a stretch. The other points, though, you had a little bit more information on. Excuse me. And like I said, I think they could have been developed a lot more as a consequence and made that more substantial. You might want to look into some of the information that you're citing. Some of the people that you quote, you quote them as writers, and if they're reporting on research that's been done, then you want to make sure that you cite the research. If they are experts, you want to give them their qualifications. Sometimes, though, you are quoting people who are columnists and opinion writers, and they are certainly entitled to their opinion, but those opinions are not necessarily expert. And there's one glaring example of a piece of opinion evidence here that's being presented that I think is really problematic, and that's Lyndon LaRouche, who I don't think anybody should be quoting for almost anything. And if you want to know why, just do a term search of Lyndon LaRouche, and you'll discover why. All right, so there are problems, I think, with some of the information that you've got there. Not all of the evidence has that problem, but some of it, like I said, I thought there were a couple places that you referred to studies, but you need to have more credible sources on those studies. Like I said, I thought the examples also toward the end were much more effective, and if you'd focused more, I think you'd have had a stronger argument. And of course, you were rushing, because you got so much to get in. You can try and put on top there.